Hello, period 4. Today we're going to do a review, hopefully it's a review, of converting or going back and forth between fractions, decimals, and percentages. Okay, this is going to be really important for this chapter that we know how to do this. Just go between one and the other. Okay, so on the first three, we have decimals, and we want to turn them into fractions. Okay. Easiest way to do that is to say the decimal. This says 6/10, so we're going to write 6/10. And then, yes, I always need you to simplify. So 6/10 as a fraction would be 3/5. Number 2 says 685 tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So we're going to write 685 thousandths. And again, you're going to divide or simplify to get 137 over 200. And number 3 says 44 tenths hundredths. So we'll do 44 hundredths and then divide, simplify to get 11/25. Okay? So going from a decimal to a fraction, say the decimal with place value, write it as a fraction, simplify. Okay, now we're going to go the other way. We have fractions and we want to write them as decimals. Okay, if the denominator is tenths, hundredths, thousandths, just say it, write it as you would. 7/10 would be 0.7 or 0.7. 2/5. Okay, we want this one as a decimal. You've got options. You can write it as a fraction with a denominator of tenths or hundredths. Times 2 times 2. That's the same as 4/10. I know how to write 4/10. 0.4. Or you can divide 2 divided by 5. Okay, again, we've got options. Divide or make an equivalent fractions. 17/20ths, I don't want to divide on that one, so I'm going to make it out of 100. Multiply by 5. 17 times 5 is 85 hundredths. How do I write 85 hundredths? 0.85. Okay, here's some more. 2/25. Again, I can make this one out of 100. Think quarters, multiply by 4 to get 8 hundredths. How do I write that? Tenths, hundredths. That would be 0.08. 17/50 as a decimal. I can make this one out of 100 by multiplying by 2 to get 34 hundredths. As a decimal would be 0.34. And 13 hundredths or 13/20ths, make it out of 100 by multiplying by 5 to get 65 hundredths. How do we write that as a decimal? 0.65. Okay, now 5 or 4 through 9 were easy because all of those denominators, you could make them out of tenths or 100ths. The next set of fractions, you can't. So it makes it a little bit harder. 5/8 as a decimal, you have to divide. 5 divided by 8. So these are going to take longer. These are a little bit annoying. So this one we have 625 thousandths. 1/3. As soon as you can remember what 1/3 is, you no longer have to show your work. Okay. 1/3 is a repeating decimal. As soon as you can remember that, you may not show your work any longer. Okay. 1/3 is a repeating decimal. 11/15. Top number always goes on the inside. I thought that was 105. I want to make sure though. That one's also gonna continue to repeat. Bring your decimal up, only put the bar over the number that repeats. Okay, so these are not the prettiest fractions, turning them into decimals. Okay, I believe this one goes in 8 times. Okay, this one would be 8,125 10,000ths. 5 and 1/8. You've got options here. We know how to write 5 as a whole number, 5 point something. So we can just do 1 divided by 8. So 5 and 1/8 would be 5 and 125 thousandths. The other way, if you wish, you could turn 5 and 1/8 into an improper, which is 41/8, and do 41 divided by 8. You will get the same thing. Okay. 17/8, you've got options. You can do 17 divided by 8. To get 2 and 125 thousandths, or turn that 17 and 1/8 into a whole mixed number, 2 and 1/8, and then do 2 is 1 whole, and then 1/8 we know is 0.125. Okay. Okay. Hopefully those are review. Moving on to the next page. Now we want to go from decimals to a percents. There is a cheat sheet on this one. Here's a tip. To go from a decimal, write this in your notes, to a percent. I'm going to write it in red. The trick is to move decimal 2 times to the right. Okay, that's the trick. So this says 35 hundredths, move it twice to the right, that's 35%. Technically, we could also say 35 hundredths is 35 over 100, and then write that fraction as a percent. The second one says 2 tenths. I need it as a percent. I need it out of 100, right? So we could multiply by 10 and 10 at the top, or move the decimal twice to the right, 20%. 18 hundredths would be 18%. The next one, 7 tenths, we can make it out of 100 since percentages are always out of 100, or move the decimal twice to the right, that's 70%. And 2 hundredths would be 2%. Okay, so the trick is when you're going from a decimal to a percent, just move that decimal twice to the right. 5 and 14 hundredths would be 514%. Okay. The next set, we're turning fractions into percentages. Again, percentages are always out of 100. So we can make equivalent fractions out of 100. 60 out of 100 is 60%. 19/20ths out of 100, since we're doing percentages, is 95 hundredths, or 95%. 3/8, this one, we can't go from eighths to hundredths, so we have to divide and turn it into a decimal, and then turn that decimal into a percent. Okay, so 3/8 as a decimal is 0.375 thousandths. Move the decimal twice to the right to go from a decimal to a percent. And we have 37.5%. Okay. 9/10 as a percent is going to be 90%. 2 and 87/100ths. Guys, one whole is 100%. 2 wholes is 200%. 87 out of 100 is 87%. Put them together, we have 287%. 13/15ths. Okay, we can't get that out of 100, so we're going to have to divide and then change that decimal into a percent by moving the decimal twice to the right. This is going to continue to repeat again, okay? Only the sixes though. Now, look at this one. If I have, I'll change it this color real quick. The sixes are repeating. When I change this into a percent, it's going to be 86.6. The bar only goes over that, the last 6 that's repeating, that 6 that's repeating. So 86.6 repeating percent. Don't round it, okay? If it's a repeating decimal, leave it alone, throw a bar over it. 1 7/8, one whole is 100%. Have we already done 7/8? I feel like we have. Maybe we haven't. 7/8. Okay, so 7/8 is 0.875. You're going to move the decimal twice to the right to make it a percent. So it's 87.5%. 100% plus 87.5% is 187.5%. 12/25. This one makes life easier because I can get from 25 to 100 by multiplying by 4. So this one's just 48%. So some of them, they're going to be real easy peasy. Others of them you got to work for. 4/9, we can't get there, so we're going to have to divide. And this one's also going to continue to repeat. So put your decimal up, move the decimal twice to the right. We have 44.4 repeating percent. Again, don't round, just if it's repeating, leave it alone. Put the bar over it. How would we do this? 3 is what percent of 8? Again, this is just 3/8. And they want to know percent. We can't get from 8 to 100, so we have to divide. So the decimal is 0.375. Move the decimal twice to the right, 37.5%. Okay. Okay, and then the only thing that might be new would be this bottom portion. Okay, we have to think a little bit about these. So these are percentages, and we want to turn them into fractions, okay? Before we can change a percent into a fraction, we have to go from a percent to a decimal first, because we say decimals as fractions. And you might think these are decimals already. No, they're percentages. They've got the percent sign. They just happen to have a decimal in there. To go from, I'm going to write this down here, to go from a percent to a decimal, you should write this down. Move it 2 times to the left. You're moving that decimal point 2 times to the left. So 2.8 0.2%, very, very small, a 0.2%. Move it twice to the left. That's 0.002 as a decimal. That says tens, hundred, thousands. That says 2 1,000ths as a fraction. Now you can simplify. That's 1/500th as a fraction. So if you see a percent and it has a decimal in it, move the decimal twice to the left. So you write it as a decimal first. 87.5% is 0.875. That's 875 tenths, hundredths, thousandths. And then you can simplify those fractions. Oh, that's actually divide by 25. You're going to get 7/8 there. That's 7/8, 0.875. You're going to start remembering that one as well. And then 225%, that one doesn't have a decimal in it. You can think of 225% out of 100, right? That's 2 wholes and 25 hundredths, which simplifies to 2 1/4 would be 2 25%. Okay. Okay, those are your notes for today. Double check in Canvas to see if there's any practice or review after these